Hello, horror lover. Are you ready for a long night of nightmares? Before we begin, I want to ask you to subscribe to the channel, and especially leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I'd love to know. Click the like button, all of this because the package arrived on a Tuesday, an ordinary day that would soon prove to be anything but. I remember the moment vividly, the sun streaming through my apartment windows, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. The air conditioner hummed softly in the background, a futile attempt to combat the sweltering July heat that had gripped the city for weeks. I'd just returned from my morning run, sweat still clinging to my skin, when I noticed the small, unmarked box sitting innocently by my front door. Curious, I picked it up, turning it over in my hands. It was lighter than I expected, no bigger than a paperback book. "That's odd," I muttered to myself, furrowing my brow. I wasn't expecting any deliveries, and there was no return address. Just my name, Alex Chen, printed in crisp black letters on a white label. Shrugging off my unease, I carried the package into the kitchen, setting it on the counter while I grabbed a glass of water. The cool liquid was a welcome relief after my run, and I drained half the glass before turning my attention back to the mysterious box. With a mix of curiosity and trepidation, I carefully peeled back the tape and opened the lid. Inside, nestled in a bed of black foam, was a sleek, matte black smartwatch. Its screen was dark, but even at first glance I could tell this was no ordinary device. The design was unlike anything I'd seen before, streamlined and futuristic with no visible buttons or ports. "What the hell?" I whispered, gently lifting the watch from its foam cradle. It was surprisingly light, almost as if it were made of some advanced composite material rather than metal or plastic. As I turned it over in my hands, a small piece of paper fluttered to the counter. I picked it up, my eyes widening as I read the message. "Alex, congratulations on being selected as a beta tester for our revolutionary new smartwatch. We at Kronos Tech believe this device will change the world. Enjoy and remember, time waits for no one." The Kronos team. My heart began to race. Kronos Tech was one of the most secretive and innovative startups in Silicon Valley. Their work in quantum computing and artificial intelligence was legendary in tech circles, but they'd never released a consumer product before. How had I been chosen for this? With trembling fingers, I slipped the watch onto my wrist. It fit perfectly, as if it had been custom-made for me. The moment it touched my skin, the screen flickered to life, displaying a simple, elegant watch face. "Wow," I breathed, tapping the screen experimentally. It responded instantly, bringing up a menu of apps and features that made my current smartwatch look like a child's toy in comparison. I spent the next hour exploring the watch's capabilities, marveling at its responsiveness and intuitive design. It seemed to anticipate my needs before I even realized them, offering suggestions and information with uncanny accuracy. As I scrolled through the apps, however, I noticed something strange. There was an icon I didn't recognize, a simple hourglass symbol that seemed to pulse gently, as if beckoning me to tap it. Curiosity got the better of me. I tapped the icon, and the screen changed, revealing a countdown timer. My breath caught in my throat as I saw the numbers. 30 guys, 30 days. But 30 days until what? Confusion washed over me as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. I hadn't set this timer. Was it some kind of pre-installed feature? A bug in the system? I tapped the screen, trying to find a way to disable or reset the timer. Nothing worked. The numbers continued their steady countdown, impervious to my increasingly frantic attempts to stop them. Frustration mounting, I decided to call the contact number provided in the package. The phone rang several times before a crisp, professional voice answered. "Kronos Tech Customer Support, how may I assist you?" "Hi, this is Alex Chen," I said, trying to keep the anxiety out of my voice. "I just received your prototype smartwatch, and there's something strange happening with it." "Ah, Mr. Chen, we're so pleased you've received your device. What seems to be the issue?" I explained about the countdown timer, my words tumbling out in a rush. As I spoke, I could hear the confusion in the representative's voice growing. I'm sorry, Mr. Chen, but I'm not seeing any record of a countdown feature in our prototype. Are you sure you're not misinterpreting one of our productivity tools? No, I'm telling you, it's right here on the screen, I insisted, my voice rising. A big countdown timer I didn't set. Can you please just tell me how to turn it off? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When the representative spoke again, their voice was hesitant. Mr. Chen, I've just consulted with our development team. They assure me there is no such feature in our current build. Perhaps you could send us a photo of what you're seeing? My stomach dropped. Yeah, I can do that, I replied, my mouth suddenly dry. I ended the call and quickly snapped a picture of the watch face, making sure the countdown was clearly visible. I sent it to the email address they provided, then waited, pacing nervously around my kitchen. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Just as I was about to call back, my phone chimed with a new email. I opened it with shaking hands, my eyes scanning the message. Mr. Chen, we have received your image and are deeply concerned by what we see. This is not a feature of our prototype, nor is it something we can explain at this time. We strongly advise you to remove the device immediately and await further instructions. A member of our senior development team will be in touch shortly. Please do not attempt to interact with the countdown feature again. Your safety is our utmost priority. Regards, Kronos Tech Support Team. I stared at the email, my mind reeling. The watch suddenly felt heavy on my wrist, the countdown numbers glowing ominously in the corner of my eye. Despite the support team's warning, I couldn't help but look at it again. 29, 23, 45, 12. The timer had already ticked away over half an hour. Whatever it was counting down to, it was relentless in its progression. A chill ran down my spine as I contemplated removing the watch. Something deep in my gut told me it wouldn't be that simple. This device, this countdown, it felt significant in a way I couldn't explain. As the day wore on, I found myself unable to focus on anything else. I kept glancing at the watch, half expecting the numbers to have vanished, proving it all to be some elaborate hallucination. But they remained. A constant reminder of... what? A deadline? A warning? A threat? That night, as I lay in bed, the soft glow of the countdown was the only light in my room. Sleep eluded me, my mind racing with possibilities, each more outlandish than the last. What would happen when the timer reached 0? Was I in danger? Were others experiencing the same thing? In the darkness, I whispered to myself, what have I gotten myself into? The watch offered no answers, its silent countdown a maddening companion in the long hours of the night. As I finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, one thought echoed in my mind. Time waits for no one. And my time, it seemed, was running out. The shrill beeping of my alarm jolted me awake, my heart pounding as if I'd just run a marathon. For a blissful moment, I forgot about the events of the previous day. Then, as consciousness fully took hold, my eyes snapped to my wrist. The watch was still there, its screen dimly illuminated in the early morning darkness. The countdown timer glowed ominously, 28, 16, 42, 37. What the hell? I muttered, sitting up abruptly. The timer had lost several hours overnight, far more than the time I'd spent sleeping. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead as I tried to make sense of it. I fumbled for my phone, squinting at the bright screen. No missed calls or emails from Kronos Tech. Whatever was happening, I was still on my own. Grogginess gave way to a gnawing anxiety as I went through my morning routine. Every few minutes, my eyes would dart to the watch, half expecting the numbers to have changed dramatically again. But they ticked down steadily, maddeningly consistent. As I stepped out of my apartment building, the humid summer air hit me like a wall. The city was already bustling, the sidewalks crowded with commuters rushing to work. I joined the flow, my mind elsewhere as I navigated the familiar route to the subway station. The underground platform was packed, the air thick with the smell of sweat and exhaust. As I waited for the train, I found myself studying the faces around me. Did anyone else have a mysterious countdown on their wrist? Were they also grappling with an inexplicable sense of impending something? The screech of the arriving train snapped me out of my thoughts. I boarded, finding a spot to stand near the doors. As the train lurched into motion, I gripped the handrail tightly, my eyes once again drawn to the watch. 28:15, 03, 12. The countdown was now prominently displayed, having taken over the entire watch face. I frowned, tapping the screen to try and bring up the regular time display. Nothing happened. "Cool watch," a voice beside me said. I looked up to see a young woman smiling at me. "Is that the new Chronos Tech prototype? I've heard rumors about it, but I didn't think they were public yet." I hesitated, unsure how to respond. Yeah," I finally managed. "It's interesting." Her eyes widened with excitement. "Wow, you must be important to get one of those. What's it like? I heard it can predict the future or something crazy like that." A chill ran down my spine at her words. "Predict the future?" I echoed, my mouth suddenly dry. She nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, there are all these wild theories online about Chronos Tech's quantum AI. Some people think they've cracked the code to seeing potential futures or something. Probably just internet nonsense though, right?" Before I could respond, the train screeched to a halt, the sudden stop nearly throwing me off balance. The doors opened and the woman gave me a quick wave before disappearing into the crowd. I stood there stunned as people pushed past me to exit. Predict the future? It couldn't be. That was impossible. And yet, the rest of my commute passed in a daze. By the time I reached my office, my mind was racing with possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. As I settled at my desk, my coworker Tom popped his head over the cubicle divider. "Hey, Alex, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I forced a smile. "Just a weird morning." "Hey, Tom, you're into all that tech stuff, right? What do you know about Chronos Tech?" Tom's eyes lit up. "Oh man, they're doing some crazy stuff. Quantum computing, advanced AI, you name it. Why do you ask?" I hesitated, then decided to take a risk. I held up my wrist, showing him the watch. "I got this prototype yesterday. It's been acting strange." Tom leaned in, his eyes widening as he saw the countdown. "Whoa, what's that counting down to?" "I have no idea," I admitted. "It just appeared, and I can't turn it off or change it." Tom whistled low. "That's wild. Maybe it's some kind of product launch countdown? Or a battery life indicator?" I shook my head. It doesn't make sense. The numbers change inconsistently, and Chronos support seemed freaked out when I told them about it. Tom's expression grew serious. "Alex, be careful with that thing. You hear stories, you know? Tech companies pushing the boundaries of what's possible, sometimes crossing lines they shouldn't." A chill ran down my spine at his words. Before I could respond, our manager called a team meeting, and the conversation was cut short. The rest of the morning dragged on, my attention constantly divided between my work and the ever-present countdown on my wrist. By lunchtime, I was a bundle of nerves, jumping at every unexpected sound. As I left the office to grab a sandwich, the watch suddenly vibrated, startling me. I looked down to see the numbers flickering rapidly, settling on a new time. 28:03 and 30 unaing. My heart raced as I realized it had jumped ahead by several hours. What did it mean? Was something about to happen? Lost in thought, I stepped off the curb to cross the street. The blaring of a car horn snapped me back to reality. I looked up to see a taxi barreling towards me, far too close to stop. Time seemed to slow down. I could see the driver's panicked face, hear the screech of brakes on asphalt. In that moment, I was certain this was it. This was what the countdown had been warning me about. Adrenaline surged through me. With a desperate lunge, I threw myself backward, feeling the rush of air as the taxi missed me by inches. I landed hard on the sidewalk, the impact knocking the wind out of me. For a moment, I just lay there, gasping for breath, my heart pounding in my ears. People crowded around, asking if I was okay. The taxi driver had stopped and was running over, his face pale with shock. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Are you all right? You came out of nowhere. I didn't see you until..." I waved him off, slowly sitting up. "I'm okay," I managed to say, though my voice shook. It was my fault. I wasn't paying attention. As the crowd began to disperse and the initial shock wore off, I glanced at my wrist. The countdown was back to its steady progression, but something had changed. In the corner of the screen, a small icon had appeared, a stylized hourglass. My blood ran cold as I remembered the woman's words from the subway. Predict the future. Had the watch somehow known this was going to happen? Had it tried to warn me? I stumbled to my feet, suddenly feeling exposed on the busy street. Paranoia set in as I noticed people staring at me. Or were they staring at my wrist? Did they know something I didn't? I hurried back to my office, my appetite forgotten. As I sank into my chair, my hands shaking, I knew I couldn't ignore this any longer. Whatever was happening with this watch, it was real, and it was dangerous. I pulled out my phone and dialed the Kronos tech support number again. This time, I wasn't going to accept any vague answers or brush-offs. As the phone rang, I stared at the countdown, its steady progression a reminder of the ticking clock I now found myself racing against. 28:02, 45:23. Whatever was coming, I had just over 28 days to figure it out, and after my near miss with the taxi, I had a sinking feeling that my life might depend on solving this mystery before the timer reached zero. As someone finally picked up the call, I took a deep breath. "This is Alex Chen," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "We need to talk about this watch, now." The adventure was only beginning, and I had a feeling it was going to be a wild ride. Little did I know just how right I was, and how much my world was about to change. The soft glow of my laptop screen illuminated my face in the darkness of my apartment. It was well past midnight, but sleep was the furthest thing from my mind. My eyes burned from hours of staring at the screen, but I couldn't stop. Not now. Not when I might be on the verge of a breakthrough. 27:08, 23, 45. The countdown on my wrist served as a constant reminder of the urgency of my search. After the near miss with the taxi, Kronos Tech had gone silent. My calls went straight to voicemail. My emails bounced back as undeliverable. It was as if the company had vanished into thin air, leaving me alone with their enigmatic device. Come on, I muttered, scrolling through yet another forum thread about mysterious technology. There has to be something here. My desk was a chaotic mess of empty coffee cups, scribbled notes, and printouts of articles about quantum computing and predictive AI. I'd taken a week off work, claiming a family emergency. In a way, it wasn't a lie. This felt like life or death. A notification popped up on my screen. A reply to one of the many posts I'd made on tech forums and social media, seeking others who might have experienced something similar. "Hey, are you the guy with the Kronos watch? I think I might have some info for you. Call me. Jake." A phone number followed the message. My heart raced as I reached for my phone. It was the middle of the night, but I couldn't wait. I dialed the number with trembling fingers. It rang twice before a groggy voice answered. "Hello? Jake? This is Alex. Alex Chen. I'm the one with the Kronos watch." There was a pause, then the sound of rustling sheets. "Oh, right. Shit, man, do you know what time it is?" "I'm sorry," I said, not feeling sorry at all. "But this is important. You said you had information?" Jake sighed. Yeah. Look, I used to work for Kronos. Junior programmer, nothing big. But I saw some things. Heard some things. They're into some seriously weird stuff, man." My grip tightened on the phone. "What kind of weird stuff?" "You ever hear of quantum entanglement?" Jake asked. "Sure," I replied. "It's when two particles become connected so that the quantum state of each particle can't be described independently, even when separated by a large distance." "But what does that have to do with my watch?" Jake chuckled humorlessly. "Everything, man. Kronos wasn't just working on smartwatches. They were trying to use quantum entanglement to predict the future. My blood ran cold. Predict the future? But that's impossible? Jake finished. Yeah, that's what I thought too, but they had this theory. If you could entangle enough particles, create this massive quantum network, you could theoretically calculate all possible futures, see the most likely outcomes before they happen. I glanced at my wrist, at the countdown that had been haunting me for days. And you think that's what this watch is doing? I don't know, man, Jake said, his voice heavy. But I do know that right before I left there was talk about a prototype. Something that could tap into this quantum network they were building. They called it Project Cassandra. After the Greek prophet, I murmured, the pieces starting to fall into place. Exactly, Jake confirmed. Look, I don't know what that watch is doing to you, but if it's connected to Project Cassandra, you might be seeing glimpses of your own future. And from what I remember of the project, it wasn't always a future you'd want to see. A chill ran down my spine. What do you mean? Jake's voice dropped to a whisper. There were accidents. Test subjects experiencing things that couldn't be explained. Some of them didn't make it. My mouth went dry. Didn't make it? Jake, what are you saying? But the line had gone dead. I tried calling back, but it went straight to voicemail. Frustrated, I tossed my phone onto the desk. My mind was reeling from the information Jake had shared. Quantum networks? Predicting the future? It sounded like science fiction. And yet, as I looked at the countdown on my wrist, I couldn't deny that something extraordinary was happening. With renewed determination, I turned back to my laptop. If Kronos was really working on technology this advanced, there had to be more information out there. I just had to find it. Hours passed in a blur of search queries and forum posts. My eyes strained in the dim light, but I couldn't stop. Not when every second brought me closer to whatever it was the watch was counting down to. As the first light of dawn began to creep through my windows, I stumbled upon a hidden corner of the internet. A forum for people claiming to have experienced time slips and future visions. Most of it seemed like the ramblings of conspiracy theorists, but one thread caught my eye. Kronos Tech Beta Testers, we need to talk. My heart pounding, I clicked on the thread. It was filled with stories eerily similar to mine. People who had received mysterious smartwatches, only to experience inexplicable phenomena. Accidents narrowly avoided. Decisions made based on information they couldn't possibly have known, and all of them had countdowns. With shaking hands, I created an account and made my first post. I have a Kronos watch. There's a countdown I can't turn off. I nearly died yesterday, and I think the watch knew it was going to happen. If anyone else is experiencing this, please contact me. We need to figure this out. I hit submit and leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. It felt both terrifying and liberating to put my experience out there, to know that I might not be alone in this. As I waited for responses, I couldn't help but think about what Jake had said. If this watch really was connected to some kind of quantum network, if it really could predict the future, what did that mean for free will, for causality, for the very nature of time itself? My philosophical musings were interrupted by a series of rapid-fire notifications. Responses to my post were pouring in. OMG, I thought I was going crazy. My countdown is at 15 days. What happens when it reaches 0? I've had my watch for a month. The timer hit 0 yesterday. You're not going to believe what happened. This has to be some kind of sick experiment. We need to stop Kronos before it's too late. I read each message with growing excitement and dread. Here was the proof I'd been looking for. I wasn't alone. But the implications were staggering. How many of us were out there? What was Kronos' endgame? As I prepared to dive into the flood of messages, my watch vibrated. I looked down, expecting to see another jump in the countdown. Instead, a message flashed across the screen. Stop digging. For your own safety. My blood ran cold. Someone was watching. Someone knew what I was doing, and they wanted me to stop. But as I looked at the countdown, still ticking away relentlessly, I knew I couldn't stop. Not now. Not when I was so close to uncovering the truth. I cracked my knuckles and turned back to my laptop. Kronos had thrown down the gauntlet, and I was ready to pick it up. Whatever this countdown was leading to, whatever future the watch was predicting, I was determined to face it head on. As I began to type out replies to my fellow beta testers, a plan started to form in my mind. If we pooled our experiences, our knowledge, maybe we could crack this thing wide open. Maybe we could take control of our futures. The sun was fully up now, casting a warm glow over my cluttered apartment. But I barely noticed. I was too focused on the task at hand, on the community of confused and frightened people I'd found, on the mystery that seemed to deepen with every new piece of information. One thing was clear: the investigation had only just begun. And with my countdown now reading 27:02:15:30, I knew I was in a race against time to uncover the truth before it was too late. Little did I know, the rabbit hole I was about to dive into would be deeper and darker than I could have ever imagined. The next 27 days would change everything, not just for me, but potentially for the entire world. The steady hum of my refrigerator was the only sound in my apartment as I sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by printouts, sticky notes, and hastily scribbled diagrams. My eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep, but I couldn't stop now. Not when I was so close to understanding. 26:14:07 22. The countdown on my wrist seemed to pulse with an otherworldly glow in the dim light of early morning. I'd been up all night, coordinating with the other Kronos watch users I'd found online. We'd formed a sort of support group, sharing our experiences and theories, trying to make sense of the inexplicable events surrounding our devices. As I reached for my coffee mug, a chill ran down my spine. The mug, which had been sitting on the edge of my desk, suddenly slid across the surface as if pushed by an invisible hand. It teetered on the edge for a moment before falling. I lunged forward, my hand outstretched to catch it, but before I could reach it, the mug froze in midair, suspended as if time itself had stopped. "What the?" I breathed, my heart pounding in my chest. As suddenly as it had stopped, the mug resumed its fall, shattering on the hardwood floor and splashing lukewarm coffee across my bare feet. I scrambled backward, my mind reeling. This wasn't the first strange occurrence I'd experienced since receiving the watch, but it was by far the most dramatic. With shaking hands, I reached for my phone and dialed the number of Dr. Eliza Chen, a quantum physicist I'd been in contact with over the past few days. "Alex?" Her groggy voice answered after several rings. "It's 5 a.m. What's wrong?" "It happened again," I said, my voice trembling. "But this time, Dr. Chen, I think I just saw time stop." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Dr. Chen spoke again, her voice was fully alert. "Tell me everything. Don't leave out any details." I recounted the incident with the mug, describing the sensation of unreality that had washed over me as I watched it hover in midair. "Fascinating," Dr. Chen murmured when I finished. "Alex, I think it's time we met in person. These phone calls and emails aren't cutting it anymore. Can you come to my lab at the university today?" "Absolutely," I said, relief flooding through me at the prospect of face-to-face help. "I'll be there as soon as I can." As I hung up, my watch vibrated. I looked down, expecting another cryptic message or jump in the countdown. Instead, I saw a map, with a blinking red dot marking a location across town. A chill ran down my spine as I realized what I was looking at. It was the exact location of Dr. Chen's lab. How did it know? How could it possibly know where I was going before I even left? Pushing aside my unease, I quickly showered and dressed. As I was about to leave, I hesitated, then grabbed a small notebook from my desk. I'd started keeping a log of all the strange occurrences, and something told me I'd need it today. The drive to the university was tense. Every red light, every lane change felt charged with potential danger. The watch's apparent prediction of my destination had me on edge, hyper-aware of my surroundings. As I pulled into the parking lot of the physics building, my watch vibrated again. I looked down to see a new message. Caution. High energy readings ahead. My mouth went dry. What did that mean? Was I walking into danger? Despite my apprehension, I made my way into the building. Dr. Chen met me in the lobby, her eyes widening as she saw the watch on my wrist. Alex, she said, her voice hushed. I'm glad you're here. Follow me. She led me through a maze of corridors to a secure lab. As we entered, I gasped. The room was filled with complex equipment, holographic displays, and in the center, a large pulsing orb of energy suspended in a containment field. What is that? I asked, unable to take my eyes off the swirling mass of light. Dr. Chen's face was grim. That, Alex, is what we believe to be a localized quantum field, a bubble of space-time that doesn't quite play by the normal rules of physics. She gestured to my watch. And I think it's directly connected to that device on your wrist. As if on cue, my watch began to vibrate intensely. The countdown numbers flickered and blurred, and I felt a strange pulling sensation, as if the very fabric of reality was stretching around me. Dr. Chen, I said, my voice tight with fear. Something's happening. She rushed to a control panel, her fingers flying over the keys. The field is becoming unstable. Alex, I need you to remain calm. Whatever happens, don't... Her words were cut off as a wave of energy pulsed from the orb. I felt myself lifted off my feet, suspended in midair just as the coffee mug had been earlier. Around me, papers and small objects floated lazily, as if gravity had simply decided to take a break. Through the haze of unreality, I saw Dr. Chen frantically working at her controls. Her voice seemed to come from far away. Alex, the watch. It's interfacing with the field somehow. You need to... Another pulse of energy drowned out her words. The world around me began to blur and shift, like a painting left out in the rain. I saw ghostly images superimposed over reality, flashes of future events, past memories, things that couldn't possibly be real. I saw myself, older and grayer, standing in a room full of cheering people. I saw a city in ruins, smoke rising from shattered buildings. I saw a small child, her eyes the same shade as mine, reaching out to me with a smile. Make it stop, I cried out, overwhelmed by the barrage of images and sensations. Just as suddenly as it had started, everything snapped back to normal. I fell to the floor, gasping for breath. The orb of energy in the center of the room had dimmed, now barely glowing. Dr. Chen rushed to my side, her face pale. Alex, are you all right? What happened? What did you see? I struggled to sit up, my head spinning. I don't know. It was like seeing 1,000 possible futures all at once. Dr. Chen, what's happening to me? She helped me to my feet, her expression a mix of concern and excitement. I think, Alex, that you've just experienced a quantum superposition on a macro scale. Your watch. It's not just predicting the future. It's showing you all possible futures simultaneously. I looked down at my wrist. The countdown had resumed its steady progression, but now there was a new icon next to it, a stylized tree with branching paths. But how is this possible? I asked, my voice shaking. And why me? Why are these watches out there at all? Dr. Chen shook her head. I don't know, but I have a theory. Come with me. She led me to a computer terminal and pulled up a series of complex equations and diagrams. We've been studying quantum entanglement for years, trying to understand how particles can affect each other instantaneously across vast distances. But what if it's not just particles? She turned to me, her eyes shining with the fervor of scientific discovery. What if consciousness itself is quantum? What if our choices, our very thoughts, are entangled across time and space? I struggled to wrap my mind around the concept. Are you saying that this watch is... what? Tapping into some kind of quantum consciousness network? Exactly, Dr. Chen exclaimed. And if that's true, if Kronos has found a way to access and manipulate this network? Alex, the implications are staggering. They could potentially alter the course of history itself. A chill ran down my spine as I remembered the visions I'd seen. The cheering crowds, the ruined city, the child with my eyes. But that's insane. It's too much power for anyone to have. Dr. Chen nodded gravely. Which is why we need to understand it. We need to find out what Kronos is planning, and we need to stop them if necessary. I looked down at my watch. The countdown a constant reminder of the ticking clock we were up against. So what do we do now? Dr. Chen's expression was determined. Now we dig deeper. We need to understand how this technology works, and we need to find out who else has these watches. And most importantly, we need to figure out what happens when that countdown reaches 0. As we bent over the computer diving into data and theories, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the brink of something monumental. The world as we knew it was about to change, and somehow, I was at the center of it all. The watch on my wrist continued its relentless countdown, each passing second bringing us closer to... what? The end? A new beginning? Or something beyond our wildest imaginations? One thing was certain. The next 26 days would be a race against time, a battle for the future itself. And I was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. The incessant beeping of hospital monitors filled the air as I sat by my mother's bedside, my eyes fixed on the steady rise and fall of her chest. The sterile smell of disinfectant burned my nostrils, a constant reminder of where we were and why. 25:03:18:56. The countdown on my wrist seemed to mock me, its steady progression a stark contrast to the uncertainty that now plagued my life. It had been less than 24 hours since my mother had collapsed at home, struck by a sudden and inexplicable seizure. Alex? My father's voice broke through my reverie. He stood in the doorway, 2 cups of vending machine coffee in his hands. Any change? I shook my head, accepting the styrofoam cup he offered. No, Dad. The doctors are still running tests. He sank into the chair next to me, his face etched with worry lines that seemed to have deepened overnight. I just don't understand. She was fine yesterday morning. How could this happen so suddenly? The guilt that had been gnawing at me since we arrived at the hospital intensified. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was somehow connected to me, to the watch, to the strange phenomena I'd been experiencing. As if on cue, the watch vibrated. I glanced down, careful to keep it hidden from my father's view. A message flashed across the screen. Temporal anomaly detected. Caution advised. My blood ran cold. What did that mean? Was the watch warning me about something? Or was it responsible for what was happening? Alex? My father's voice pulled me back to reality. Are you okay? You look pale. I forced a smile. I'm fine, Dad, just worried about Mom. Before he could press further, a doctor entered the room. Dr. Patel, according to her name tag, looked between us with a grave expression. Mr. Chen, Alex, she began, her voice gentle but firm. We've received the results of Mrs. Chen's latest scans. I'm afraid it's not good news. My father gripped the armrests of his chair, his knuckles turning white. What is it, Doctor? Dr. Patel took a deep breath. We've detected a mass in Mrs. Chen's brain. Given its size and location, it's likely been growing for some time. I'm honestly surprised she hasn't shown symptoms before now. The room seemed to spin around me. A brain tumor? But how? Why now? But she was fine, I heard myself say, my voice sounding distant and hollow. She just had a checkup last month. How could they have missed this? Dr. Patel shook her head, her brow furrowed. That's what's puzzling us, Alex. We've reviewed her previous scans. There was no sign of this mass just 4 weeks ago. It's as if it appeared overnight. As she continued to explain treatment options and next steps, my mind raced. The watch's warning echoed in my head. Temporal anomaly. Could it be possible? Had my meddling with time somehow caused this? The guilt threatened to overwhelm me. I stood abruptly, mumbling an excuse about needing air, and rushed out of the room. I found myself in a quiet corner of the hospital garden, my hands shaking as I pulled out my phone to call Dr. Chen. She answered on the first ring. "Alex, what's wrong?" "It's my mom," I said, my voice cracking. "She's in the hospital. Brain tumor. Dr. Chen, I think I caused this." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Dr. Chen spoke again, her voice was cautious. "Alex, I know you're upset, but we can't jump to conclusions. Tell me exactly what happened." I recounted the events of the past day, including the watch's warning about a temporal anomaly. As I spoke, I could almost hear the gears turning in Dr. Chen's mind. "This is concerning," she said when I finished. "Alex, I think you need to come back to the lab. We need to run some tests, see if we can determine what's causing these anomalies." "I can't leave my mom," I protested. "I understand," Dr. Chen said gently. "But Alex, if what we suspect is true, if these watches are really manipulating time and space, then what's happening to your mother might be just the beginning. We need to understand what we're dealing with before more people get hurt." The weight of her words settled on me like a physical burden. She was right, of course. But how could I explain this to my father? How could I leave my mother's side when she needed me most? As if in answer to my unspoken questions, my watch vibrated again. This time, the message sent a chill down my spine. "Chronal displacement imminent. Prepare for temporal shift." "Dr. Chen," I said, my voice tight with fear. "Something's about to happen. I think—" My words were cut off as the world around me suddenly blurred. Colors smeared together like wet paint. Sounds distorted into an incomprehensible cacophony. I felt as if I was being stretched and compressed simultaneously, my very atoms seeming to rebel against the laws of physics. And then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. I found myself standing in the same spot in the hospital garden, but everything was different. The trees were taller, the buildings around me sleeker and more modern. And my watch. 22-14-05-32. I stared at the display in disbelief. I had lost nearly 3 days in what felt like an instant. Panic rising in my throat, I rushed back into the hospital. The layout was the same, but the technology, the faces, everything was subtly altered. I ran to my mother's room, my heart pounding. The room was empty. The bed was made. No sign that anyone had been there recently. "No, no, no," I muttered, spinning around wildly. "This can't be happening." "Alex?" a familiar voice called out. I turned to see my father walking towards me, but he looked older. Gray streaked his hair, and new lines creased his face. "Dad?" I choked out. "Where's Mom? What's going on?" His brow furrowed in confusion. "Alex, what are you talking about? Your mother, she's been gone for 2 years now. Are you feeling all right?" The world seemed to tilt on its axis. 2 years? But how? What had I done? Before I could respond, a young woman rounded the corner. She looked to be in her early 20s, with familiar eyes that widened in recognition when she saw me. "Uncle Alex?" she said, her voice a mix of surprise and concern. "What are you doing here? I thought you were in Europe for your research." I stared at her, uncomprehending. "Uncle?" But I didn't have any nieces, unless... "Lily," I guessed, remembering the vision I'd had in Dr. Chen's lab of a little girl with my eyes. She nodded, exchanging a worried glance with my father. "Yeah, it's me." "Uncle Alex, are you okay? You look different." I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. How could I explain that from my perspective, Lily had been born, grown up, and lost her grandmother in the span of a few minutes? My watch vibrated again insistently. I looked down to see a new message. "Timeline compromised. Seek immediate assistance." The room began to spin around me. I was vaguely aware of my father and Lily calling my name, of hands reaching out to steady me. But their voices seemed to come from far away as darkness crept in at the edges of my vision. As I felt myself falling, one thought crystallized in my mind. I had to fix this. Somehow, I had to find a way back to my own time, to save my mother, to prevent whatever catastrophe the watch was counting down to. But first, I had to understand what was happening to me, and for that, I needed Dr. Chen. As consciousness slipped away, I clung to that thought like a lifeline. Find Dr. Chen. Fix the timeline. Save Mom. Stop the countdown. The world faded to black, but the numbers on my watch continued their relentless march towards zero. A countdown to a future I no longer recognized, in a present I never meant to create. The ripple effect of my actions was spreading, changing lives, altering reality itself. And I was at the center of it all, a reluctant time traveler caught in a web of quantum entanglement and chronal displacement. As I drifted in the darkness, one question echoed in my mind. How do you fix time when you're the one who broke it? The harsh fluorescent lights of Dr. Chen's lab buzzed overhead as I paced back and forth, my footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. The events of the past few days, or years depending on your perspective, had left me feeling unmoored, adrift in a timeline I no longer recognized. 2107-42-18. The countdown on my wrist continued its relentless march towards zero, a constant reminder of the ticking clock we were racing against. Dr. Chen sat hunched over a complex array of equipment, her fingers flying across multiple keyboards as she input calculations and adjusted parameters. Are you sure this will work? I asked, unable to keep the edge of desperation out of my voice. Dr. Chen looked up, dark circles under her eyes betraying her own exhaustion. Honestly, Alex, I'm not sure of anything anymore, but this is our best shot at resetting the temporal anomalies you've been experiencing. I nodded, trying to quell the fear rising in my throat. After I'd collapsed at the hospital, I'd woken up in this new, altered present, a world where my mother had died 2 years ago, where I had a niece I'd never met, where my entire life had taken a different path. It had taken days of frantic searching and explaining to find Dr. Chen and convince her of what had happened. Now, we were attempting to use her quantum field generator to create a controlled temporal bubble, a space where we could potentially manipulate time itself. Okay, Dr. Chen said, standing up from her workstation. I think we're ready. Remember the plan? I nodded, reciting the steps we'd gone over countless times. Enter the field. Focus on the specific moment I want to return to. Use the watch as an anchor point, and above all, stay calm. Dr. Chen managed a tight smile. That's right. Whatever happens in there, Alex, remember that your mind is the key. The quantum field responds to consciousness. Your thoughts, your intentions, they'll shape what happens. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Let's do this. Dr. Chen flipped a series of switches, and the large metallic ring in the center of the lab hummed to life. Arcs of blue-white energy crackled around its circumference, growing in intensity until they formed a shimmering curtain of light. Good luck, Alex, Dr. Chen said, her voice barely audible over the rising whine of the machinery. Bring us all back. With one last nod, I stepped forward into the quantum field. The world around me dissolved into a kaleidoscope of light and sensation. I felt as if I was being pulled in every direction at once, my very atoms seeming to vibrate at impossible frequencies. Focus, I told myself. Remember why you're here. I concentrated on the image of my mother, healthy and smiling, on the day before she collapsed. I pictured the hospital room, the moment before I'd received the news about her tumor. If I could just get back there, maybe I could change things. Maybe I could save her. The chaotic swirl of energy around me began to coalesce, forming shapes and scenes from my memory. I saw flashes of my childhood home, my college dorm room, the day I'd received the Chronos watch. The images flickered and changed rapidly, like a film reel spinning out of control. Come on, I muttered through gritted teeth. Take me back. Take me back. Suddenly, everything snapped into focus. I found myself standing in the hospital room, exactly as it had been that fateful day. My mother lay in the bed, peacefully asleep. My father sat in the chair beside her, his head nodding as he dozed. Relief washed over me. It had worked. I was back. But before I could take a step, before I could even draw a breath, my watch began to vibrate violently. I looked down to see the screen flashing an urgent warning. Critical temporal paradox detected, evacuation imminent. No, I cried out, but it was too late. The room began to warp and twist, reality itself seeming to rebel against my presence. I felt the same stretching sensation I'd experienced before, but this time it was more intense, more painful. I caught one last glimpse of my mother's face before the world dissolved into chaos once more. When the vertigo subsided, I found myself back in Dr. Chen's lab. But something was terribly wrong. The equipment was sparking and smoking, alarms blaring from every direction, and the countdown on my watch. 20:02, 30, 45. Alex! Dr. Chen's voice cut through the cacophony. She rushed towards me, her face pale with shock. What happened? The readings went off the charts. I stared at her in horror, the implications of what I'd just experienced sinking in. It didn't work, I said, my voice hollow. I got there, I saw them, but the watch. It said something about a temporal paradox. Dr. Chen's eyes widened. Of course, she breathed. You can't exist in the same time frame twice. The universe itself rejects the paradox. But that's not the worst part, I said, holding up my wrist to show her the watch. Look at the countdown. We've lost over a day. Whatever I did, it accelerated the timer. Dr. Chen cursed under her breath, a rare display of emotion from the usually composed scientist. This is bad, Alex, really bad. If the countdown is linked to some kind of temporal catastrophe, then we've just brought it closer, I finished, the weight of our failure settling on my shoulders like a physical burden. A new voice cut through our grim realization. I tried to warn you, Dr. Chen. Some things aren't meant to be tampered with. We both spun around to see a man standing in the doorway of the lab. He was tall and lean, with silver hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to look right through me. But what caught my attention was the device on his wrist, a Chronos watch identical to mine. Who are you? I demanded, instinctively stepping in front of Dr. Chen. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. My name is Dr. Marcus Holloway. I'm the lead scientist at Chronos Tech and the creator of the device you've been so recklessly misusing. My mind reeled. The creator of the watch? Here? How did you find us? Dr. Chen asked, her voice tight with suspicion. Holloway tapped his own watch. Did you really think we wouldn't be monitoring the quantum fluctuations caused by these devices? Your little experiment set off every alarm we have. I felt a surge of anger. Monitoring? You've been watching us struggle with this thing, watching people get hurt, and you did nothing? Holloway's expression hardened. We've been doing far more than you realize, Mr. Chen. The very fabric of space-time is at stake here. Your amateur meddling has only made things worse. Then help us fix it, I pleaded, desperation overriding my anger. Tell us what's really going on. What is this countdown leading to? For a moment, Holloway's mask of cool detachment slipped, and I saw a flicker of genuine fear in his eyes. The end, he said quietly. Or perhaps a new beginning. We're not entirely sure. What does that mean? Dr. Chen pressed. Holloway sighed, suddenly looking very tired. The watches aren't just keeping time, Dr. Chen. They're holding it together. When we began our experiments with quantum entanglement and temporal manipulation, we discovered something unexpected. A flaw in the very structure of reality. My blood ran cold. A flaw? Holloway nodded grimly. Think of space-time as a fabric. Our experiments created a tear in that fabric. The watches, the countdown, they're a patch. A temporary fix while we search for a permanent solution. But the countdown is still going, I said, a new fear gripping me. What happens when it reaches zero? That, Holloway said, is what we're all trying to prevent. If we can't find a way to repair the damage before the countdown ends. He didn't need to finish the sentence. The implications were clear and terrifying. The end of time itself. the unraveling of reality as we knew it. "So what do we do now?" I asked, looking between Holloway and Dr. Chen. Holloway's expression was grim but determined. "Now, Mr. Chen, you come with me, and your unique experiences with the watch make you invaluable to our efforts. And you, Dr. Chen, will have to decide whether you want to be part of the solution or continue working against us." As the weight of our new reality settled over us, I couldn't help but glance at my watch one more time. 20:01:15:33. The countdown continued its relentless march towards zero, each passing second bringing us closer to a future none of us could fully comprehend. Our failed attempt to manipulate time had only accelerated the approach of a potential catastrophe. As I prepared to leave with Holloway, to dive deeper into the mystery of Chronos Tech and the impending temporal disaster, one thought echoed in my mind. In trying to save my mother, had I inadvertently put the entire universe at risk? The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with dangers we could scarcely imagine. But one thing was clear. Time was no longer just passing. It was running out. The sleek, silent elevator descended deep beneath the Earth's surface, each floor we passed marked only by a subtle change in the pressure in my ears. Dr. Holloway stood beside me, his face an unreadable mask as we plunged further into the hidden depths of Chronos Tech's true headquarters. 19:8:53:27. The countdown on my wrist seemed to pulse with an otherworldly glow in the dim light of the elevator. I couldn't shake the feeling that with each passing second, we were racing towards something beyond our comprehension. "How much further?" I asked, breaking the tense silence. Holloway's lips quirked in what might have been a smile. "Anxious, Mr. Chen? Don't worry, we're almost there." As if on cue, the elevator slowed to a stop. The doors slid open silently, revealing a vast, cavernous space that took my breath away. The facility was a marvel of futuristic technology. Holographic displays floated in mid-air, showing complex equations and 3D models of what looked like the fabric of space-time itself. Scientists in pristine lab coats hurried from station to station, their faces etched with the same mixture of determination and fear I'd seen in Holloway's eyes. But what dominated the space was a massive structure in the center of the room. It looked like an enormous inverted pyramid made of shimmering energy, its apex pointing down into a swirling vortex of light. "Welcome," Holloway said, a hint of pride in his voice, "to the heart of Project Chronos." I stepped out of the elevator, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. "What is all this?" Holloway began walking towards the central structure, gesturing for me to follow. "This, Mr. Chen, is humanity's last hope, the culmination of decades of research into quantum mechanics, temporal physics, and the very nature of reality itself." As we approached the energy pyramid, I could feel the hairs on my arms standing on end. The air crackled with an otherworldly energy that set my teeth on edge. "You said before that there was a flaw in the fabric of space-time," I said, recalling our earlier conversation. "Is this?" Holloway nodded grimly. "What you're looking at is a visualization of the tear in reality our experiments created. That vortex at the bottom, that's what we're trying to stop from consuming our entire universe." The magnitude of what he was saying hit me like a physical blow. I staggered slightly, steadying myself against a nearby console. How did this happen?" Holloway's face darkened. "Hubris, Mr. Chen, pure and simple. We thought we could master time itself, bend it to our will. Instead, we nearly broke it entirely." He led me to a workstation near the base of the energy pyramid. With a few quick gestures, he brought up a holographic display showing a timeline of events. "It started innocently enough," Holloway explained. "We were experimenting with quantum entanglement, trying to find a way to transmit information faster than light. But in the process, we stumbled upon something extraordinary, a way to peek into other timelines, other potential futures." I watched in awe as the hologram showed simulations of branching timelines, each decision point creating new parallel realities. We thought we'd made the discovery of the century, Holloway continued, his voice tinged with regret. Imagine being able to see the consequences of your actions before you make them, to choose the best possible future from an infinite array of possibilities. But something went wrong, I guessed, a chill running down my spine. Holloway nodded. We got greedy. We weren't content with just observing. We wanted to control, to shape reality itself to our will. He swiped at the hologram and the image changed to show a catastrophic explosion of energy. 3 years ago, we attempted to merge two timelines, to create a perfect future by cherry-picking the best outcomes from multiple realities. Instead, we caused a rupture in the very fabric of space-time. I stared at the simulation, watching as the rupture grew, consuming entire timelines in its wake. And the watches? The countdown? Holloway's expression was grim. A stopgap measure. We found a way to temporarily stabilize the rupture by anchoring it to specific points in our timeline. The watches are quantum-entangled tethers, holding reality together through sheer force of will and advanced technology. The weight of this revelation settled over me like a physical burden. I looked down at my wrist, at the innocuous-looking device that was apparently all that stood between us and the end of everything. But the countdown is still going, I said, a new fear gripping me. What happens when it reaches 0? Holloway's eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw raw fear in them. That's what we're trying to prevent. If we can't find a way to seal the rupture permanently before the countdown ends. He didn't need to finish. The implication was clear and terrifying. So what do we do now? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Holloway's expression hardened with determination. Now, Mr. Chen, you help us save the world. Your unique experiences with the watch, your ability to perceive and even influence temporal anomalies, you might be the key to solving this crisis. Before I could respond, an alarm blared throughout the facility. Red lights began flashing, and the scientists around us erupted into frenzied activity. What's happening? I shouted over the din. Holloway was already moving, rushing towards a central command station. I followed close behind, my heart pounding in my chest. We've got a critical fluctuation in the temporal field, a young scientist called out, her fingers flying over a holographic keyboard. The rupture is expanding faster than we can contain it. I watched in horror as the energy pyramid in the center of the room began to pulse erratically, the vortex at its base growing larger by the second. Divert all power to the containment field, Holloway ordered, his calm demeanor cracking under the pressure. We can't let it breach the facility. As chaos erupted around us, I felt a strange sensation building in my chest. It was like a humming, a vibration that seemed to resonate with the very air around me. I looked down at my watch and gasped. The countdown was accelerating rapidly, the numbers blurring as they spun towards 0. 18, 59, 59, 59, 18, 59, 59, 58, 18, 59, 59, 57. Holloway, I called out, holding up my wrist. Something's wrong with the watch. He turned, his eyes widening as he saw the rapidly decreasing numbers. It's responding to the fluctuation, he said, his voice tight with tension. The rupture is pulling at the tethers. If we can't stabilize it... Suddenly, a bolt of energy lashed out from the vortex, striking a nearby console. The scientist working there was thrown back, crying out in pain. Without thinking, I rushed to help her. But as I reached out, time seemed to slow around me. I saw the arc of energy as it leapt from the console, tracing a path through the air towards me. In that moment of hyper-awareness, I felt a connection, not just to the watch on my wrist, but to the very fabric of time and space around me. I could sense the rupture, feel the strain it was putting on reality. And somehow, instinctively, I knew what I had to do. I closed my eyes, focusing all my will on the watch, on the countdown, on the tether it represented. I imagined it as a physical thing, a lifeline anchoring our reality against the pull of the void. Hold, I whispered, pouring every ounce of my being into that single word. Hold. The world seemed to pause, hanging in perfect balance for one eternal moment. Then, with a sound like a thunderclap, everything snapped back into motion. The energy bolt dissipated harmlessly into the air. The alarms fell silent. The pulsing of the energy pyramid steadied. I opened my eyes to find everyone in the room staring at me in shock. Holloway approached slowly, his expression a mixture of awe and suspicion. "What did you do?" he asked quietly. I shook my head, still trying to process what had happened. I'm not sure. I just felt like I could connect with it somehow, like I could will it to stop. Holloway's eyes narrowed. Impossible. Unless... He trailed off, lost in thought for a moment before snapping back to attention. "We need to run some tests. Now." As he led me towards a bank of complex-looking medical equipment, I glanced down at my watch one last time. 18:59, 59, 56. The countdown had stabilized, but it was still ticking down. We had bought ourselves some time, but the fundamental problem remained. As I settled into the examination chair, electrodes being attached to my head and chest, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had just taken the first step on a journey that would change everything. The truth had been unveiled, and it was more terrifying than I could have imagined. But with that truth came a glimmer of hope. Somehow, some way, I was connected to this cosmic drama. And maybe, just maybe, that connection would be enough to save us all. As the machines around me whirred to life, I closed my eyes and focused on the steady beat of my heart, the ticking of the watch, and the fragile thread of time that connected us all to an uncertain future. The harsh fluorescent lights of the Kronos Tech medical bay cast an eerie glow over the array of advanced equipment surrounding me. I lay on an examination table, my body covered in a web of sensors and electrodes, each one feeding data to the bank of computers lining the walls. 18:03, 27, 14. The countdown on my wrist continued its relentless march towards zero, a constant reminder of the ticking clock we were racing against. Dr. Holloway stood nearby, his eyes darting between the holographic displays and my prone form. "Anything?" I asked, trying to keep the edge of desperation out of my voice. Holloway's brow furrowed as he studied the readouts. "It's unprecedented. Your neural patterns are showing a level of quantum entanglement I've never seen before. It's as if your consciousness is somehow linked directly to the temporal field." I sat up, wincing as the movement tugged at the electrodes attached to my skin. "What does that mean exactly?" Holloway turned to face me, his expression a mix of excitement and trepidation. "It means, Mr. Chen, that you might be our best hope for closing the rupture. Your connection to the watches, to the very fabric of space-time itself. It's unique. If we can harness that connection..." He trailed off, lost in thought. I could almost see the gears turning in his brilliant mind, formulating plans and discarding them just as quickly. "So what's our next move?" I prompted, eager to take action. Holloway snapped back to attention. "We need to get you closer to the rupture. If your presence alone was enough to stabilize the fluctuation earlier, direct contact might allow us to begin the process of sealing it permanently." A chill ran down my spine at the thought of getting any closer to that swirling vortex of temporal energy. But I knew we had no choice. The fate of the entire universe hung in the balance. "Okay," I said, steeling myself. "What do I need to do?" Holloway's lips quirked in what might have been a smile. "First, we need to prepare you. The energies you'll be dealing with are beyond anything the human body was meant to endure. We've developed a prototype suit that should offer some protection, but it's untested," I finished for him. "Great." As if on cue, a team of technicians entered the room, wheeling in what looked like a high-tech spacesuit. It was sleek and black, covered in a network of glowing blue lines that pulsed with energy. "This is our temporal shielding suit," Holloway explained as the technicians began helping me into it. "It's designed to create a bubble of stable space-time around you, insulating you from the worst effects of the temporal energies." As the last seal clicked into place, I felt a strange sensation wash over me. It was as if I was suddenly disconnected from the world around me, viewing everything through a slight haze. "How does it feel?" Holloway asked, studying me intently. I flexed my fingers, marveling at how the suit moved like a second skin. "Strange. But good, I think. Like I'm both here and not here at the same time." Holloway nodded, seemingly satisfied. "That's the temporal field generated by the suit. It should help you navigate the unstable areas around the rupture." With the suit in place, we made our way back to the main chamber. The massive energy pyramid loomed before us, its swirling vortex a constant reminder of the danger we faced. As we approached, I could feel the watch on my wrist vibrating more intensely. Even through the suit, I sensed the pull of the temporal energies, calling to something deep within me. "Remember," Holloway said, his voice tense, "your goal is to reach the base of the pyramid. Once there, you need to focus on the connection you feel to the watches, to the tethers holding our reality together. If we're right, you should be able to influence the rupture directly." I nodded, my mouth too dry to speak. This was it, the moment everything had been leading to. "Good luck, Mr. Chen," Holloway said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "The fate of the universe is in your hands." With a deep breath, I stepped forward, crossing the safety barrier and entering the zone of temporal instability surrounding the pyramid. The effect was immediate and disorienting. The world around me seemed to blur and shift, reality itself becoming fluid and uncertain. I saw ghostly images superimposed over the facility, flashes of other times, other possibilities. I gritted my teeth and pressed on, focusing on putting one foot in front of the other. Each step was a battle against the chaotic energies swirling around me. Halfway to the pyramid, a particularly violent temporal surge hit me. I staggered, nearly falling to my knees. In that moment of weakness, the visions intensified. I saw myself, older and grayer, standing before a cheering crowd. I saw cities in ruins, smoke rising from shattered buildings. I saw a small child with my eyes reaching out to me with a smile. "Focus, Alex." Holloway's voice crackled through the suit's comm system, snapping me back to reality. "You're almost there." I shook my head, clearing the visions, and pushed forward. The base of the pyramid loomed before me, the swirling vortex of the rupture a maelstrom of light and energy. As I reached out to touch the energy field, time seemed to slow around me. I felt that same connection I'd experienced before, but magnified 1,000-fold. It was as if I could sense every watch, every tether holding reality together. And beyond that, I sensed the rupture itself, a wound in the very fabric of space-time, bleeding potential energy and threatening to unravel everything. I closed my eyes, focusing all my will on that connection. I imagined the tethers as threads, weaving them together to form a patch over the rupture. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, I felt the energies begin to shift. The chaotic swirl of the vortex began to calm, the edges of the rupture starting to knit together. Hope surged through me. It was working. But then, just as quickly, everything went wrong. A surge of energy unlike anything I'd felt before ripped through the temporal field. I cried out in pain as it overwhelmed the suit's defenses, searing through my body like liquid fire. In that moment of agony, my concentration shattered. The delicate weave of tethers I'd been creating unraveled, and the rupture began to expand once more. "Alex," Holloway's panicked voice came through the comm. "Get out of there. The rupture is destabilizing." But I couldn't move. The energy held me in place, my body rigid as waves of temporal distortion washed over me. Through the haze of pain, I became aware of a new sensation. It was as if I could feel every possible version of myself across countless timelines, all converging in this one moment. And with that awareness came a revelation. The rupture wasn't just a tear in space-time, it was a convergence point, a nexus of all possible realities. "Holloway," I managed to gasp out, "I understand now. We can't close it. We have to redirect it." "What are you talking about?" Holloway's voice was frantic. "Alex, you need to get back here now." But I knew what I had to do. With the last of my strength, I reached out not to close the rupture, but to guide it. to channel its energy into a new pattern, a stable loop that would contain its power without destroying reality. As I poured every ounce of my will into this task, I felt something within me change. It was as if I was becoming one with the temporal field, my consciousness expanding beyond the confines of my physical body. The world around me blurred and shifted, timelines collapsing and reforming in dizzying patterns. I saw glimpses of pasts that never were, and futures that might never be. And through it all, the countdown on my wrist continued its relentless march towards zero. 1759, 5959, 1759, 5958, 1759, 5957. As the numbers ticked down, I felt a sense of finality settling over me. Whatever happened next, I knew that nothing would ever be the same. With one final push of will, I completed the temporal loop. The rupture's energy flowed into the new pattern, stabilizing into a self-contained system. As the last of my strength gave out, I felt myself falling. But whether I was falling through space or time or something else entirely, I couldn't say. The last thing I heard before consciousness slipped away was Holloway's voice, distant and distorted. My God, he's done it. He's actually done it. Then darkness claimed me and I knew no more, knew no. The steady beep of medical equipment slowly pierced the veil of unconsciousness that had enveloped me. I blinked, my vision blurry, as the stark white ceiling of what appeared to be a hospital room came into focus. The air smelled of antiseptic and ozone, an odd combination that made my nose wrinkle. He's awake, a familiar voice said. Dr. Holloway's face swam into view, his expression a mixture of relief and concern. Alex, can you hear me? I tried to speak, but my throat was dry and raw. A nurse appeared, offering me a sip of water through a straw. The cool liquid was a balm to my parched mouth. What happened? I managed to croak out. Holloway's face grew serious. You've been unconscious for nearly 3 days, Alex. What you did at the rupture, it was unprecedented. Miraculous, even. But it nearly killed you. The memories came flooding back, the swirling vortex of temporal energy, the searing pain as I channeled the power of the rupture, the sensation of my consciousness expanding beyond the confines of my body. With a jolt of panic, I looked at my wrist. The Chronos watch was still there, but the display was dark. The countdown, I said, my voice urgent. What happened to the countdown? Holloway's expression tightened. That's complicated. When you redirected the rupture's energy, it affected all the tethers, the watches. They've changed. As if on cue, the watch's display flickered to life, but instead of the countdown I'd grown accustomed to, it showed a swirling pattern of light constantly shifting and reforming. 14, 23, 59, 59. The numbers appeared briefly before dissolving back into the swirling pattern. My heart raced as I realized what it meant. We're still counting down, I whispered. Holloway nodded grimly. Yes, but not in the way we were before. The temporal loop you created has stabilized the rupture, but it's also changed the nature of time itself. We're no longer just racing against a clock. We're navigating an entirely new temporal landscape. I struggled to sit up, wincing at the ache that seemed to permeate every cell of my body. So what does that mean for us? For the world? Holloway helped me into a sitting position, his face grave. It means we're in uncharted territory, Alex. The loop you created has bought us time, but it's also introduced new variables we don't fully understand. Reality as we know it is fluid, malleable in ways it never was before. As if to illustrate his point, the room around us seemed to shimmer for a moment. I blinked, and suddenly the sterile hospital room had transformed into a high-tech medical bay, more in line with the advanced facility I remembered from before my encounter with the rupture. You see, Holloway said, seemingly unfazed by the shift. These temporal fluctuations are becoming more common. Most people don't notice them, their minds automatically adjusting to the new reality. But for those of us connected to the watches, to the tethers, we can see the changes, I finished, a chill running down my spine. Holloway nodded. Exactly. And that's why we need your help more than ever, Alex. Your connection to the temporal field, your ability to influence these fluctuations. You might be the key to navigating this new reality and finding a permanent solution before the final countdown ends. I looked down at the watch, its swirling display a constant reminder of the strange new world we found ourselves in. And what happens if we don't find a solution in time? Holloway's expression darkened. We're not entirely sure. Best case scenario, reality settles into a new stable configuration. Worst case, the temporal loop collapses, taking our entire universe with it. The weight of his words settled over me like a physical burden. The fate of everything, not just our world but all possible worlds, rested on what we did in the coming days. So what's our plan? I asked, swinging my legs over the side of the bed. My body protested the movement, but I pushed through the discomfort. We didn't have time for weakness. Holloway helped me to my feet, steadying me as a wave of dizziness passed. First, we need to get you back to full strength. Your encounter with the rupture has changed you, Alex. We need to understand the extent of those changes if we're going to utilize your abilities effectively. As we made our way out of the medical bay, I noticed other changes in the facility. The corridors seemed to shift and reconfigure themselves as we walked, sometimes subtly, sometimes dramatically. It was as if the building itself was breathing, alive with temporal energy. The fluctuations are getting stronger, Holloway explained as we entered a large circular room dominated by holographic displays. We're using every resource at our disposal to map the changes, to try and predict the patterns. I watched in awe as the hologram showed a three-dimensional model of what looked like the fabric of space-time itself. Waves of energy pulsed through it, causing ripples and distortions that seemed to echo the swirling pattern on my watch. It's beautiful, I murmured, reaching out to touch the hologram. As my fingers made contact, the display flickered and changed, responding to my presence in a way I didn't fully understand. Holloway's eyes widened. Fascinating. Your connection to the temporal field seems to have deepened. You're not just observing these changes, Alex. You're influencing them. Before I could respond, an alarm blared throughout the facility. The holographic display erupted into a frenzy of activity, the waves of temporal energy spiking dramatically. "What's happening?" I shouted over the din. Holloway was already moving, his fingers flying over a nearby console. Massive temporal surge detected. Oh no. The floor beneath our feet began to tremble. I stumbled, catching myself on the edge of a desk. "Holloway, what is it?" His face was pale as he turned to me. "The loop is destabilizing. The changes we've been seeing, they're accelerating. If we don't do something soon..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. I could feel it in my bones, in the very air around us. Reality itself was coming apart at the seams. I looked down at my watch, the swirling pattern more chaotic than ever. For a brief moment, the countdown reappeared. 14:01, 23:45. Just over 14 hours left. 14 hours to save everything. "Tell me what to do," I said, a newfound determination filling me. "Whatever it takes, whatever the risk, I'm ready." Holloway nodded, his expression grim but resolute. "We need to get you back to the rupture. Your connection to the temporal field. It's our best chance at stabilizing the loop. But Alex, you need to understand the danger. Last time it nearly killed you. This time it might unmake me entirely," I finished for him. The thought should have terrified me, but instead, I felt an odd sense of calm, as if this was always where I was meant to end up. "Are you sure about this?" Holloway asked, his voice soft. "Once we start, there's no turning back." I took a deep breath, centering myself. I thought of my mother, lost in a timeline I could no longer reach. I thought of the glimpses I'd seen of other possibilities, other lives I might have lived. And I thought of the billions of people out there, blissfully unaware of how close we were to the edge of oblivion. "I'm sure," I said, my voice steady. Let's finish this. As we hurried through the shifting corridors of the facility, preparing for one final, desperate attempt to save reality itself, I couldn't help but feel a sense of bitter irony. All this had started with a mysterious countdown on a watch I never asked for, and now here I was, racing against a countdown that might determine the fate of all existence. The watch on my wrist pulsed with temporal energy, a constant reminder of the ticking clock we faced. But as we approached the chamber housing the rupture, I felt something else growing within me. A power I didn't fully understand, but one I knew I would need to harness if we were to have any hope of success. The final countdown had begun, and I was ready to face whatever came next, no matter the cost. The air crackled with palpable energy as we approached the temporal rupture chamber. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if reality itself was pushing back against our presence. The facility around us flickered and shifted, sometimes appearing as the high-tech complex I'd grown accustomed to, other times morphing into strange, alien landscapes that defied description. 13 Brewers 05-23. The countdown on my wrist pulsed urgently, the swirling pattern occasionally coalescing into numbers that served as a stark reminder of our dwindling time. Holloway walked beside me, his face a mask of grim determination. "Alex," he said, his voice tight with tension, "before we do this, there's something you need to know." I turned to him, noting the conflict in his eyes. "What is it?" Holloway took a deep breath. "The temporal loop you created. It's not just containing the rupture. It's become a nexus point for all possible timelines. Every choice, every decision that's ever been made or could be made, they're all converging here." The implications of his words hit me like a physical blow. "You mean?" "I mean that when you interface with the rupture this time, you won't just be trying to stabilize our reality. You'll be navigating the infinite possibilities of all realities. The power to reshape existence itself will be at your fingertips." I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me, the weight of this revelation threatening to overwhelm me. "Why are you telling me this now?" Holloway's expression softened slightly. "Because you need to understand the full scope of what you're about to face. And because you need to know that whatever happens in there, whatever you decide, it's your choice. Not mine, not Chronos Tech's. Yours." As we reached the massive doors leading to the rupture chamber, I took a moment to center myself. The watch on my wrist hummed with energy, and I could feel a corresponding resonance deep within my being. "I'm ready," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Holloway nodded, then pressed his hand to a scanner by the door. With a hiss of hydraulics, the massive portal slid open, revealing the chaotic maelstrom of temporal energy beyond. The rupture had grown since I'd last seen it, the swirling vortex of light and color now filling nearly the entire chamber. Arcs of temporal lightning crackled through the air, causing reality to warp and bend wherever they struck. As I stepped into the chamber, the full force of the temporal energies washed over me. It was like being hit by a tidal wave of pure possibility. I saw flashes of other lives, other worlds, some beautiful, some terrifying, all achingly real. "Remember your training." Holloway's voice crackled through the comm system in my suit. "Focus on your connection to the watch, to the tethers. Don't let the visions overwhelm you." I gritted my teeth and pushed forward, each step a battle against the surging tide of temporal energy. As I neared the heart of the rupture, the visions intensified. I saw myself as a child the day I received my first watch, but this time, it was a Chronos device, setting me on a different path entirely. I saw my mother, alive and well, proudly watching me graduate from a prestigious university. I saw cities burning, civilizations falling as the temporal rupture tore reality apart. "It's too much," I gasped, falling to my knees as the weight of infinite possibilities pressed down on me. "You can do this, Alex," Holloway's voice urged. "You're the only one who can. Focus." With a monumental effort, I forced myself back to my feet. I reached out, my hand trembling as it neared the pulsing core of the rupture. The moment I made contact, my consciousness exploded outward. I was everywhere and everywhen at once. I saw the birth of stars and the death of universes. I witnessed the entire sweep of human history. Every triumph, every tragedy, every moment of quiet beauty. And through it all, I felt the fragile threads of the temporal tethers, struggling to hold reality together against the overwhelming force of the rupture. With newfound clarity, I understood what I had to do, not just to contain the rupture, but to heal it, to weave the infinite strands of possibility into a new, stronger fabric of space-time. I reached out with my mind, grasping the tethers and beginning the intricate process of reweaving reality. It was like trying to rebuild a shattered mirror while looking at your reflection in each individual shard. As I worked, I became aware of other presences around me, not physical beings, but echoes of other versions of myself from across the multiverse, each one offering their own unique perspective, their own strand to add to the weave. "It's working," I heard Holloway's distant voice exclaim. "The rupture is stabilizing." But I knew it wasn't enough. Stabilizing the rupture would only be a temporary solution. To truly fix this, to heal the wound in reality, I had to go deeper. I delved into the very core of the temporal maelstrom, to the point where all possibilities converged. And there, in that infinitesimal moment of pure potential, I made a choice. With all the will I could muster, I began to reshape reality. Not to create a perfect world. I understood now that such a thing was impossible, and even attempting it had been what caused this crisis in the first place. Instead, I sought balance. A reality where the infinite possibilities could coexist in harmony, where the power to shape time would be diffused across all of existence, rather than concentrated in the hands of a few. As I worked, I felt myself changing. My consciousness expanded beyond the limits of my physical form, becoming one with the temporal energies I was manipulating. I was no longer just Alex Chen. I was becoming something more. "Alex!" Holloway's voice broke through my concentration. "Whatever you're doing, you need to finish it now. The temporal loop is collapsing." I looked down at my wrist, at the watch that had started this whole journey. The swirling pattern had given way to a final countdown. Groar, 5, or 4, or 3. With a final surge of effort, I completed the reweaving of reality. The rupture began to close, the chaotic energy settling into a new, stable pattern. 0, Xiao, Xiao, 0, Xiao, 1, 0, Xiao. As the countdown reached 0, there was a moment of perfect stillness. Then, with a soundless explosion of light and energy, the world around me shattered and reformed. I found myself standing in a familiar place, the park near my old apartment, where I'd first received the Chronos watch. But everything was different. The colors seemed more vivid, the air charged with a subtle energy I'd never noticed before. As I looked around in wonder, I became aware of a presence beside me. I turned to see a version of myself, older, wiser, with eyes that held the knowledge of countless lifetimes. "Well done," my other self said with a smile. "You've done what needed to be done." "What happens now?" I asked, still trying to process the enormity of what had just occurred. The other Alex gestured around us. "Now, life goes on, but with a difference. The power to shape time, to influence reality, it's no longer concentrated in the watches or in any one person or organization. It's a part of everything and everyone, in small ways they might not even notice." I looked down at my wrist. The Chronos watch was gone, replaced by a simple timepiece that nevertheless seemed to pulse with a subtle energy. "And us?" I asked, somehow knowing that I was no longer quite the same person I had been when this all started. My other self smiled enigmatically. "We have a new role to play. Guardians, you might say. Watching over the timelines, ensuring that the balance we've created remains intact." As he spoke, I became aware of other versions of myself, Countless iterations spread across time and space, all connected, all working in harmony to maintain the new cosmic order we had created. It's a big job, I said, feeling both awed and slightly overwhelmed by the responsibility. It is, my other self agreed. But we're not alone. Every person in their own way is now a custodian of time. Our job is simply to guide, to nudge things back on course when necessary. As the full implications of our new reality settled over me, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced since this whole journey began. The countdown that had haunted me for so long was gone, replaced by the steady, reassuring rhythm of a universe in balance. Ready to get started? My other self asked, holding out a hand. I took a deep breath, looking out at the world, at all worlds, spread out before us. A smile tugged at my lips as I reached out to grasp my own hand. Ready? I said. And with that, we stepped forward into a new era, guardians of a reality where time was no longer a ticking clock counting down to disaster, but a vast, interconnected web of possibility waiting to be explored. The end of our countdown had become a new beginning for all of existence, and I, in all my infinite variations, would be there to watch over it, now and for all time.